China just built a solar cell that blew straight through the wall silicon physically cannot cross, and the lab that confirmed it, twice, works for the United States government. April 2025, Golden, Colorado. Inside the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, the U.S. Department of Energy's lab, and one of the handful of referees the solar industry trusts to make a record official, a measurement team tests a cell from Xi'an, China, and writes down a number no silicon cell has ever touched. To feel the weight of that number, rewind 71 years. Murray Hill, New Jersey, 1954. Three Bell Labs researchers, Darrell Chapin, Calvin Fuller, and Gerald Pearson, unveil the first practical silicon solar cell. It converts about 6% of sunlight into electricity, and the New York Times says it may mark the beginning of a new era. It does. That 6% grows into the entire modern solar industry. Today, about 98% of the world's panels run on crystalline silicon by the industry's own roadmap count, and 703 gigawatts of modules shipped in 2024 alone. One material, one design, 70 years of total rule, which is exactly why the Colorado number matters. It didn't come from silicon alone. And buried in the dates sits a pair of numbers that flips how the whole race reads. They only land once silicon's real ceiling is on the table. Because silicon has a ceiling, a hard one. And by 2024, the entire industry was scraping its knuckles on it. The wall is physics, not engineering. Sunlight arrives as a mix of high-energy blue light and low-energy red. A silicon cell is tuned to one slice of that mix. Photons too weak pass straight through and are lost. Photons too strong get caught but dump their extra energy as heat. Two leaks, built into the atom itself. Add up every unavoidable loss, and the math lands on a brutal figure, 29. 4%. That is the theoretical maximum a single-layer silicon cell can ever reach. Not with today's machines, ever. And the industry knows exactly how close it has crawled. The record stood at 6 in 1954. By May 2024, the world's best silicon cell, built by LONGi, the Chinese giant that is the world's largest maker of silicon wafers and modules, reached 27, 30%. 11 months of work later, the same company pushed it to 27. 81, verified by Germany's ISFH Test Institute. So run the arithmetic. 71 years of the best engineering on Earth bought roughly 22 points, and there's barely a point and a half of road left before the wall. The last half point alone took 11 months. How much of what remains is even worth chasing? That's the crack in the old order. The incumbent's own record holder ran out of runway. Hold on to that 6 from 1954. It's one half of a pair that lands at the end. But the strange part is what happened around that record. In the very same month, LONGi squeezed silicon to 27. 81%, April 2025, the company announced a second number from a second research line. A number that made its own fresh world record look like a rounding error. And it had nothing to do with silicon working alone. The second research line was built around a crystal most people couldn't pick out of a lineup, perovskite. The name belongs to a mineral dug out of Russia's Ural Mountains in 1839 and named for the mineralogist Lev Perovsky. The lab version is man-made, a crystal you can mix in solution and coat onto a surface as a film 100 times thinner than a human hair. Its first public outing was embarrassing. A Japanese lab, 2009, a tiny cell that fell apart within minutes. Keep that date. It's the other half of the pair. Because perovskite has the one talent silicon lacks. It's tunable. Dial the recipe and it drinks the blue, high-energy light silicon wastes. So engineers lay it directly on top of a silicon cell, and the stack becomes two engines splitting one beam of sunlight. Top layer takes the blue. Bottom layer takes the red. The combined theoretical ceiling jumps from silicon's 29, 4 to around 43%. That is the architecture NREL measured in April 2025. LONGi's tandem cell came back at 34, 85%, a world record for silicon perovskite tandems and more than 5 points above anything a lone silicon cell will ever reach. Notice where the certifying happened. At a U.S. federal lab in Golden, Colorado, half a world from LONGi's headquarters. America's own referee signed China's record. The fair objection: record cells are usually postage stamps, brilliant in the lab and useless on a roof, which is why June 2025 matters more. At the industry's big Shanghai trade show, LONGi showed a tandem cell at full production size, the footprint that actually goes into a rooftop panel measured at 33%. Certified by NREL again. No mass-producible cell had ever crossed 33, and the official solar cell efficiency tables logged it at roughly a fifth more output than single-junction silicon per the same announcement. By July 2026, the line had moved again to 35. 5%, certified this time in Europe by the European Commission's Solar Test Lab. 3 records, 2 referees on 2 continents, 15 months. So who absorbs the hit? Start with the hardware bolted to your own roof. And keep one eye on Ohio, where a company that built its entire business without crystalline silicon was reading these certificates closely. Now size what just became second best. Crystalline silicon is the market, about 98% of global module production, per the ITRPV industry roadmap, in a year that shipped 703 gigawatts of panels. Every suburban rooftop array, every utility-scale farm from Texas to the Gobi, nearly all of it built on an architecture whose absolute best case now sits 5 to 6 points below numbers the referees have already stamped. On the scoreboard, the whole industry trusts the efficiency tables curated at the University of New South Wales, the certificates from Golden. Silicon is now the floor of the stack, not the summit. The panel on your roof still works. It'll keep working for 25 years. It has simply been demoted in place, the way a phone turns old the morning the new one is announced. And the gap is not theoretical. Oxford PV, the British firm commercializing the same tandem idea, sells modules, it says, deliver up to a fifth more energy from the same patch of roof. Same sun, same racking. 20% more electricity on the maker's own numbers, and that is the spread developers and utilities now get to price into every bid against plain silicon hardware. Then there's the twist that should genuinely spook the silicon supply chain. The company breaking silicon's crown is the king of silicon. LONGi is one of the biggest solar manufacturers on Earth. It spent 2 decades perfecting the incumbent technology, and it holds the single-junction record. It is torching its own moat anyway, because owning the successor beats defending the past. When the market leader files its flagship product under bottom layer, the argument about where this goes is over. So who on the American side has already read that scoreboard? Because the sharpest confession in this story didn't come out of Xi'an or Beijing. It came out of that company in Ohio, and it carries a date, February 25th, 2026. On that date, First Solar, America's biggest homegrown solar manufacturer, signed a patent licensing deal with Oxford PV covering perovskite products in the United States. A license is the paperwork stage of intent. It clears the way for potentially manufacturing and distributing perovskite hardware on American soil. First Solar built its empire on thin film panels, never crystalline silicon, and it already runs a perovskite development line in Perrysburg, Ohio, turning out small test modules. Chief Executive Mark Widmar put the direction on record. In his words, continue pursuing viable pathways to manufacturing and commercializing thin film perovskite products. That is the incumbent's confession. America's largest panel maker is paying for patent cover on the same cell family, a Chinese record just validated. A license is not a factory, and First Solar is careful to keep its own language at pathways. But nobody buys patent cover on a technology they intend to skip. The receipts stretch back further. September 2024, Oxford PV shipped the first commercial perovskite tandem panels anywhere out of its factory in Brandenburg, Germany, to a US buyer for a utility-scale project. Modules at 24. 5% efficiency, with the company claiming up to a fifth more energy than silicon equivalents. Tandem stopped being a lab story the day that truck rolled. And 2 weeks after that, 35. 5. The record holder itself moved. On July 29th, 2026, LONGi announced it would put just over 200 million yuan, about $30 million, into a 100 megawatt tandem pilot line in Shanxi province. Nobody is calling that mass production, and it isn't. A pilot line is where a lab record learns to survive a factory floor. The bridge is being built in public, with a budget attached. Laid end to end, the pattern reads, Silicon's record holder hits the wall. The tandem record breaks the same month. America's referee certifies it twice. The first commercial tandems land on US soil. The biggest US maker licenses its way into the same family, and the record holder funds the pilot phase. Put the 2 clocks side by side, and the whole century collapses into 4 numbers. And here it is, the part that makes everything else make sense. 2 clocks. Silicon's clock started in Murray Hill in 1954 at 6%. After 71 years of the best engineering money can buy, it reads 27, 81, with the wall at 29. 4 already in headlight range. Call it 22 points in a lifetime. Perovskite's clock started in that Japanese lab in 2009 at 3, 8% in a cell that couldn't survive a coffee break. 17 years later, stacked on top of silicon, the certified number reads 35. 71 years for 22 points. 17 years for nearly 32. That's the pair, and it's why every other number here bends the way it does. One last look at Golden, Colorado. A U.S. government lab measured a Chinese cell and made it official, twice. The Bell Lab's 6% that opened the solar century now sits at the bottom of somebody else's stack. The record, the production size proof, the first shipments, the pilot budget, the pieces are all on the board, and most of them sit in China. Silicon had one job left, holding the ceiling. The ceiling is gone.